Jimmy King. I'll be your host and tour guide for the next 90 minutes. We talk about living in a quantum reality. Be very, very quiet. So before we actually get started in any of the details of the quantum reality, I want to kind of give you the backstory of how I got here and what this all means to me. This is a philosophy discussion. It's not a physics discussion, although next year at the AG in Hollywood I'll be giving a discussion on quantum mechanics. But today we're talking about personal perspectives of reality. And I have to tell you that all of my life, I have seen the world different than my peers, ever since I was a kid. And when I was young, I really wanted to be like everybody else. I wanted to see the world the way everybody else did. And I was quite adept at mimicking their behavior and their vocal patterns. And they allowed me into their groups, and I felt like I belonged. But nonetheless, I was not really comfortable because I wasn't myself. I was being the person that I thought they wanted me to be included in their groups. And so as I got older, I began to be more comfortable with myself. And I tried to understand why I was so different from my peers. So I did reading, and I looked into philosophy and reality and perceptions and all those sort of things. And today's discussion is the culmination of my lifetime of all of this analysis. So I want to start with a real quick explanation of how I am different from my peers. A few days ago, I was at breakfast, sitting over in hospitality. And some of my friends from Boston came over, a family, and they walked over to the table where I was sitting by myself, and they sat down and they said, "We knew that that was you, because we know that you like to sit at a table by yourself, and so we thought we would join you." I'm glad I don't need to explain to you the irrationality of that particular perspective, but that is basically all of my life, is I don't understand how people think and how they behave. So we're going to start this whole discussion really talking about you and everybody and how we build our realities. So when you were born, in that singular moment when you took your first breath, your reality was quite simple. You spoke neither German nor Swahili. You were not communist or socialist. You did not love or hate anybody or anything. But very quickly, as your life progressed and as you experienced more things, you started to build your reality, your understanding of how the world is. And in this discussion, I'm going to be using the term blocks of reality. I'm not going to use Legos because it's a trademark and I might get sued. And as Will Wheaton pointed out yesterday, you don't know how to spell Legos anyway. But nonetheless, so if you take the example of when you are young and you first get mobile, you start to crawl around and you experience the world. You explore the world by taking things and putting them in your mouth. So you grab a cookie. You put that cookie in your mouth, it tastes good. So now you know that cookies are good. You go outside and you take a rock. You put the rock in your mouth, the rock doesn't taste good. So that becomes a block of reality. Cookies taste good, rocks don't taste good. And you probably put more cookies in your mouth than they taste good, and you put more rocks in your mouth, and every time you do it, the rocks always taste bad. So that becomes a fact. That becomes truth. Rocks don't taste good, I don't eat rocks. But the more cookies that you eat, you realize that cookies taste wonderful. And in fact, you do this more often and you start to realize a more complex reality about cookies. Because, a chocolate cookie tastes good, a vanilla cookie tastes good, a Milano tastes good, and each one is an individual block and they begin to fit together. And then you begin to notice that all the cookies are stored in a cabinet way up high and you can't reach them. And so you begin to realize that whatever is in that cabinet must be good. So your reality becomes more complex. And then you learn that all of the things that are dangerous and will kill you are conveniently stored under the sink where you can easily reach them. Now, perhaps you don't understand it at the time, but as you grow, you begin to understand why. And each of these individual blocks becomes a part of your perception, the way you understand things. As you get more communicative, your parents begin to tell you things, and your siblings begin to tell you things, and your teachers, and your priests, and your rabbis, and you begin to learn faster and faster, and you start adding more blocks. And as you add these blocks, they start to fit together. That's why I use the example of the things that look like Legos but aren't actually Legos. Because your reality begins to make sense. It's not just facts, it's not just information. It's information that fits together in a cohesive pattern that you can understand, and it's repeatable. So that when you go to a stranger's house and you see a cookie, you know that the cookie tastes good, because in your mind, you already have the knowledge about the cookie. Let's take, for example, when you're young and your mother says, don't touch fire, you will get hurt. Now, you trust your mother loves you, she wouldn't lie to you, except the thing about Santa being able to visit all houses in the world in a 24-hour period. We won't get into the details about that. Nonetheless, your mom says, don't touch fire, it's going to hurt, so you trust your mother. And then, a year or two later, you're playing with fire, you put your hand in it, and you get burned. So now you've added another block. You have the first block, your mother says, don't play with fire. You have the second block, where you actually play with fire and hurt. Those two blocks fit together, and you form a new reality of fire hurts. I shouldn't put my hand in fire. And then you get older, and you study biology, and you study physics, and you start to understand what fire really is and how the body works. And you begin to understand the science behind why you shouldn't stick your hand in the fire. And then you see videos of people who are horribly burned, and you see how terrible that is. And each time, each piece of information becomes a new block, and it fits together with all of those other blocks. Such that, if I were to stand here right now with a flame, and I put my hand over the flame, and I really want to demonstrate this, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I told you, and I stood with my hand in the flame, and I told you that the reason I wasn't getting burned is I was using my telekinetic abilities to control the temperature of the flame so that I did not get burned. You would all think that it was a magic trick. Even though you could see my hand in that flame, you would still, in your mind, not believe that I was using my telekinetic powers to control the temperature of the flame. Why? Because you have blocks that you've learned that there is no such thing as telekinetic power, and perhaps the 9-year-old you would actually be really excited and at the end want to know how to use these telekinetic powers. But the adult you, who no longer has fun, you know everything already. And so you figure, well, it's a magic trick, and maybe after the thing I'll find out how that magic trick works. So that's what happens. Through our life, we begin to form these blocks again and again and again. And eventually, when we truly learn to communicate, we start to learn systems of reality. Systems are wonderful. There's so many systems. Your religion is a system. It's a group of facts, a group of truths, a group of reality that's already put together, already formed into these beautiful blocks that form a giant, cohesive system. And all you have to do is believe in the system in order to accept all of the facts and all of the truths within that system. Biology, mathematics, geometry, physics. These are all systems. I will stand in front of you right now, and I will tell you with 100% certainty that in any right triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of two adjacent sides. I can't prove it, but I know that it's been proven. I was taught that it's part of this system of mathematics that makes it true. And so I will argue with you all night long if you try to tell me anything else is true, unless you go non-Euclidean and you're trying to trick me and I won't even go there. But nonetheless, I don't have to know, I don't have to be able to prove the Pythagorean theorem. All I need to do is trust that it's part of mathematics, and I believe in that system. And so I get to believe in all of these truths. Now we have problems with that, because oftentimes our systems conflict with one another. Oftentimes there are paradoxes between our systems. And the most classic example is creation versus evolution. Okay? If you are a member of an organized religion that teaches you that God created the world, and you have a strong scientific mind, and you understand how evolution works, and the history of the Big Bang, you have a paradox there. And it's up to you to resolve that paradox. You may resolve it by saying that the religion is absolutely true, and science just hasn't figured out the mysteries of God yet. Or you may say that the science is really perfectly true, and that the religion is just kind of a nice story to help people understand things. But that's up to you. That is up to your individual perspective. Is there a question there?
Well, can you turn your mic up just a tiny bit?
Put my mic up a tiny bit.
Either move it up or turn it up.
Well, I can't turn it up because it's way back there, and it would be dangerous if I played with it. Is that any better?
Oh,
No?
yeah.
A little?
Now we know why that other guy was holding it.
Yeah, now we know. Okay. So I have an expert, and you're very sure, but nonetheless, he's going to go back there and he's going to play with my my controls. So while he is doing that, I'm going to have to keep my head walk this way. I really chose a perfect show to record. Anyway, are we? What? One more. Is that better? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I would hate to get to the entire end of the show and think half the people couldn't actually hear it. Although I do love listening to myself, but that's beside the point. So nonetheless, so we build our realities, and we build it based upon our personal experiences, what our parents teach us, what our schools teach us, what our religion teaches, what our bowling club teaches. And as we get older, more and more of this reality fills our mind, and we have to put it together into this one giant piece of reality that makes sense, so that we can understand everything in the world, so that we can know the difference between a magic trick and real physics. So how do we use this to interpret reality? Now, I have done this experiment at several RTs, or this presentation, and normally what I would do is I would take this and toss this into the audience. But one of the things I learned is that Mensans tend not to have good eye-hand coordination. So you're just going to have to go with me on pretending that I toss this into the audience. The whole purpose of that is that before I toss this in the audience, I don't tell you what it is. I simply hold it up like this and I throw it. And every single time that I have done that, people reach out to catch it. Why? How? Well, they generally recognize these as Mardi Gras beads. They can generally figure out how much they weigh, how dangerous they are. They may be inclined to flash themselves so that they can increase the probability. It hasn't happened, but I'm just saying it works, in case you're interested. But nonetheless, they do not think that these are dangerous. These are normal. These are Mardi Gras beads. How do they know that? I didn't tell you that these are Mardi Gras beads, and you're supposed to catch them. How do you know? Well, you're old. You've had Mardi Gras beads thrown at you before, or you've seen people throw Mardi Gras beads, or seen people catch Mardi Gras beads. And so you know that they're not dangerous, they're fun, and you want to wear them outside and show everybody about the Mardi Gras beads you cut. And by the way, if you want to come up after, I have 3 sets of Mardi Gras beads. But, hang on. That's okay. All right. Now, I also throw this guy into the audience. I'm not going to throw him tonight. But when I do that, it's possible that you might not understand. You might not understand, and you might not be as inclined to catch it until such point as I show you that is in fact softer and lighter than the Mardi Gras beads. But if you didn't already have that perspective, if you didn't already know what this was, you might actually shy away from it. Why? Because you didn't have that in your head. And by the way, you have it in your head now. You're welcome. I've just given you a new block of reality. But we do this. Oh, that was objects. Concepts. All right. We do this not only with objects, but we do it with concepts. If I were to mention the word abortion right now, before I even say anything after that, you have already gone through your head, your brain, in its magnificent beauty, has already pulled together all of the facts that you know about abortion and all the things you already believe are true and false, right and wrong. So that anything I say after that word will be interpreted by the existing reality in your head. And if I really wanted to convince you of something, whether you think this and I want you to think that, or you think that and I want you to think this, I would have to not only give you the facts that I believe, but I would have to change your reality. I would have to go in and take the individual blocks and pull them out and give you new blocks to give you an entire new perspective. The same thing applies if I said the words Hillary or Donald. You already have some sort of opinion, I'm assuming, and based upon the Facebook postings, those are very strong opinions. But you already have some preconceived notion, and it's not based upon one thing that you get. It's based upon thousands of blocks of reality, thousands of ideas, thousands of neurons firing in your head that remember something and don't remember other things. such that as you interpret each new piece of reality, you interpret it through the filter of your existing reality, because you can't take something new and stick it in your head if it doesn't fit with the other things that are already in your head. So that is how we, as people, understand things after we grow and we already know a lot of other things.
Timmy,
Yes?
move the mic to the inside, then you'll be better.
Turn the mic to the inside.
It keeps flapping around and it's not catching your voice.
How's that?
Good.
Is that good? Yeah, oh, thank you.
We have
I tried using this. This is horrible. And it was someone that talked like this all the time. No. So, I want to give you a rather extreme example. September 11th, 2001. I think most of the people in this room are familiar with the events of that day. On that day, 19 men hijacked 4 planes, crashed 2 in the World Trade Center, crashed 1 in the Pentagon, and the 4th one was on its way somewhere in Washington, probably White House, Pentagon, something like that. Now, you have...
Oh, back up.
All right, so we're gonna wait just a second. Tell me when you're ready. Right now. Is that okay? I'm back on, and I'm projecting. Anyway, on that day, these 19 men hijacked those planes, crashed them into a bunch of buildings, and if I were to ask you your opinion of those people, you would probably use strong negative words. You would use the word terrorist. You would use the word evil. You would use, scum, rotting in hell, something like that. But if I were to go to another part of the world, I would find them calling them the Magnificent 19. I didn't make this up. This is an actual, very popular poster in many parts of the world. Okay? Those 19 men were heroes in the war against Islam. They gave their lives in a great struggle to defeat the Western powers that were fighting Islam. So how is it possible that there are millions of people who think strong negative thoughts about those 19 men? And there are, millions of people, and millions of people who think that they are the Magnificent 19. And I'd be willing to bet there are at least 2 or 3 people at this AG who believe that 9/11 never happened. Okay? They have proof. They say, how is it possible that a plane crashed into the Pentagon and there's no plane parts anywhere to be found? Right? So they know for a fact that there was in fact no 9/11. It was all a government conspiracy. There were no hijackers. They were, robot-controlled planes. But the question comes, within the situation, if you believe one or the other, how do you know that your reality is correct? Your perspective is valid. Okay? We know from simple Boolean logic that if one thing is A and the other thing is not A, that they cannot both be correct. One must be right, one must be wrong. But how? How do we know? I'm going to have a suggestion in that in a minute. When we look at the question of reality and ultimate truth, and we look at the philosophers throughout history, the great philosophers from Aristotle to Douglas Adams, okay, they have looked at this. In fact, 3 people got it. Thank you. I think I'm related to 2 of them, but that's okay. They have not come up with any solution to what the ultimate truth. They can't agree. In fact, they can't even agree that reality is real. Our latest great philosopher, Elon Musk, thinks that we're all in a big computer program. I can't argue with the guy. It's a fun idea. But nonetheless, if they can't come up with a solution to the ultimate truth, how am I going to come up with it? And the answer is, I'm not. Okay? I'm not that smart. I don't even really want to try to do that. But nonetheless, talking to him. So, I'm perfectly happy with I think, therefore I am. That's about the best, I mean, sure, Descartes spent all of his life and that was like the best thing he could come up with. But since I can't come up with anything better, I'm going to go with that. Which reminds me, did you hear about when Descartes went into a restaurant and ordered a hamburger? And the waitress says, do you want fries with that? And he says, I think not. And he disappeared. I love that joke. Anyway. So the only thing that I can come up with, and this is me personally, is that the only way that you can actually measure whether your reality is right or wrong, good or bad, is by comparing it to the collective reality of the society around you. But comparing your reality against society is a lot like using a slinky to measure distance. I mean, I can say that this room is 42 slinkies wide, and you may say that the room is 57 slinkies wide. And I'm pretty sure if we both measured it, we'd both be right. And to be honest with you, if I can't prove that this room is 42 slinkies wide, I'm just going to get a bigger slinky. That's what we do. We believe our reality. We have things that we believe are right or wrong. And if the people around us don't accept those realities, we find different people. It's the beauty of the internet. No matter how insane you are, no matter what crazy idea you have, no matter what crazy idea you have, click, come on, clicker, hurry up. All right, one more time. There we go. No matter what crazy idea you have, you can find a group of people on the internet who will agree with you. And that's what we do. So if I have it on good authority that there are a large number of people who will become Canadians should Donald Trump get elected. Why? Because they need to change their reality. They cannot accept a reality where Donald Trump is the President of the United States. So they move elsewhere. I think really this is the new reality. For anything online. And by the way, if you're blogging and people want to listen to you, you need to go and do it in all caps, because that's all the problem. So how do we really validate our reality? Or why do we believe that our reality is so valid? What makes it feel so correct? We know that if we sat down with every other person in this room and we talked about what we believe and what we don't believe, what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, I don't think that any one of us would find another person who has the exact same beliefs. So how do you know that your beliefs are right? Because I know we have this general circle. We have this circle of people who agree with us, and they are right. We have a circle of people who disagree with us, and that's what we call agree to disagree, because we're different but not too different. And then outside of that are all the people who are wrong. And the fact is, the number of people that are wrong, if you include all of these circles of everybody in the world, there are probably more people on the you are wrong side than within the agree to disagree and agree to section. So the reason our realities seem so good, so correct, that when we trust them, is that we've known them all our lives. They were given to us by our parents. And they got them from their parents, and they got them from their parents, and we got them from the teachers who cared for us and trusted us, and we got it from our coaches, and we got it from family members and friends. We grew up with this reality. And all of the pieces make sense, because as we were growing up, when things didn't make sense, we took them out and we put different realities in. So we can't just take one giant new reality. We can't have everything that we believe and all of a sudden say, oh, you know what? Yeah, those 19 guys, they are magnificent. I'm going to stick them in there. They don't fit. There's no room in our reality to say those 19 people are magnificent. We are comfortable with the existing paradoxes that we have. I swear, I really want to do like a 2-hour session just on paradoxes. I love talking to people about reality. I love hearing what they think, what they feel, how they came about their realities. But when we get to paradoxes, it becomes tough, because people don't think they have paradoxes in their life. They think everything fits together. But once you start digging down into the real details of, did Jesus really walk on water? Well, how did he do that? How did he defy the laws of physics? Generally speaking, when I get to that point in the discussion pretty much ends. Because it becomes too complex. It doesn't, the blocks no longer fit, and people no longer want to think that their reality, it has these paradoxes in it. So we try and keep it light and talk about good things. We don't talk about paradoxes, we don't talk about hatred. When I ask somebody if they hate, no, I'm a good person, I don't hate anybody. Then we go online and look at their Facebook postings. I would say it contradicts that statement, but nonetheless, whenever I try to talk to a person about their hatred, or the word hatred, the immediate reaction is, no, I don't hate. I'm not a hater. I love everybody. If I came back across condescending on that, I seriously, I did not mean that. I'm just sharing some personal experiences on that. Our realities are reasonably consistent within our existing social contract. This gets back to the fact that the people that are around us agree with the things that we say and the things that we do. So that, you know, if I choose to be a vegetarian, I would tend to hang around with vegetarians or people who are understanding vegetarians. I would not be involved with somebody who is a meat eater and, you know, thinks that vegetarianism is stupid. If I was in a relationship with that and I was a vegetarian, I probably wouldn't be in a relationship with that person for very long. I would at least find somebody who understood why I was a vegetarian and would accept it and would work with me on that. By the way, I love bacon. I'm not a vegetarian. And if there are any people in Firehouse here, okay. The answer is please, not bacon. So it is very hard for us as people to perceive a reality outside of our own existence. And I want to walk you through the history of our solar system. You know? We go back to Ptolemy. And Ptolemy made these brilliant charts, and he charted out the position of every star in the universe and how it moved. And his charts were perfect. He was able to predict the motion of the planets and the stars with remarkable accuracy. And he showed how they would move across the sky, and then they would stop, and they'd make a big loop backwards, and then they'd come back around again before they circled the Earth. And then Copernicus came along. And he said, wait a minute, you know what? I understand that's a reality. I understand that's true. I was taught that. I believe that. However, what if, just what if, instead of revolving around the Earth, the universe revolved around the sun in perfect circles. Absolute perfect circles. And so Copernicus, gee, dentures. Copernicus, I can't say his name. The guy with the sea. He came up with this whole new idea, and when he did, nobody believed it. Nobody wanted it. He was a heretic. You know, he was not only going against science, he was going against the church. But he was able to think outside of his existing reality and come up with a new brilliant plan of how the entire universe was going in perfect circles around the Earth. And everyone loved it eventually, and everyone believed it. It became the scientific truth until Newton came along. And Newton said, well, you know what? Maybe they're not perfect circles. I'm going to invent something called calculus. And I'm going to come up with these predictions that say it's not perfect circles around the sun. It's actually these ellipses, and I can calculate them. And that became the new truth, because everyone was able to do the exact calculations and prove, and it was perfect, well, almost perfect, except for Neptune. It didn't quite fit the bill. But nonetheless, Newtonian physics became fact, it became the reality, and everyone accepted it, everyone believed it, and you have to be crazy to define Newtonian physics until Albert Einstein came along. And he said, well, you know what? Maybe this gravity isn't something that travels through space. Maybe these objects are actually warping space and time, and it still fits generally these Newtonian laws, but I have a new set of calculations that actually solves the Neptune problem. Mercury, thank you. You should have corrected me earlier. Now, I'm going to have to go back and erase the tape before Mercury, so I sound intelligent. Nonetheless, so all of the people throughout history that we have considered geniuses are the ones that are able to think outside of their existing reality. And it's hard to do, because everything that we see, everything we hear, everything we feel, it's automatically interpreted in our brain within the information that we already know and we already understand. So the question is, can we change our reality? And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is obviously yes. We change our reality all the time. We change individual blocks. Let me give you some examples. When I was a kid, I loved Bill Cosby. I memorized everything Bill Cosby. I saw everything about Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was perfect. Today, I'm not so hot about Cosby. I changed those blocks. And, you know, was my perception of Bill Cosby perfect back then? Obviously not. Is my perception of Bill Cosby perfect right now? Probably not. And my source of information is far from perfect. But nonetheless, I made that change based upon the existing information that I have, and I just didn't want to disturb people. So let me give you another example. I'm Catholic. I was born a good Catholic boy. I went through all the catechism and all the training and stuff. And the best part about being a young Catholic person is you don't have to understand, you just have to remember. You go to Sunday school, you have catechism, you memorize, you repeat, and the better you are repeating and agreeing, the better, the more stickers you get. And I was really good at getting stickers, trust me. And then when I grew up, I decided to actually study my religion. And so I got the Bible and I did Bible study courses, and I started to have some problems. I mean, I understand the church has it all mapped out, the Catholic Church. I'm Catholic, and I read how they explain everything that they believe and how it's all true, but it didn't make sense to me. So I kind of had a choice. I could abandon the Catholic Church, or I could kind of tweak my reality as a Catholic. And I chose to tweak my reality. For example, the sacrament of reconciliation. In the Catholic Church, when you sin, your soul gets dirty, you go to a priest, you tell him what you did wrong, he gives you penance, 10 Hail Marys, 10 push-ups, don't tell anybody that I touched you. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. I'm going to take that as a yes. All right. But nonetheless, I came up with my own idea. I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell God personally. I'm going to go straight to God and get rid of the middleman. I'm going to tell him what I did wrong. I'm going to tell him I'm sorry, and he's going to forgive me. And that's what I did. I took out the block, which is the sacrament of reconciliation, and I put in a new block that says I'm going to talk to God directly. And I've done that with other parts of my religion, going to church every Sunday. I totally understand the value of community and bonding and being together. I'm 100%, but the requirement of every single Sunday and every single holy day, that one didn't make sense. So I kind of adapted that one. I took one out and kind of shaved it off a little bit and says that doesn't have to be every Sunday. It can be, as long as you are part of the Catholic community and you're active in your Catholic community, you're still doing what the Bible tells you to do. Now there's a danger there. Because if I change too many blocks of my Catholic Church, I'm going to end up Episcopalian. But that's a risk I'm willing to take. When I was a kid, we had an Episcopalian that lived next to us, and I asked my mother if Episcopalians went to heaven. And she said, yes, but they go to puppy heaven. They don't go to real heaven. Which I thought was wonderful. I would love to go to puppy heaven. I've got like 1,000 pets in puppy heaven right now, and I would love to meet them again. But not only can we change the individual blocks, which we do on a daily basis, but we can change entire systems of reality. And the first example I think of is religion. People can convert from one religion to another, and when they do that, we use that word, conversion. And the reason we call it conversion is because it is so complex. There are so many blocks that we have to take out and new blocks that we have to put in that we can't just say, oh, I'm changing religion. Now I could say, today I'm Catholic, and tomorrow I'm Jewish, and then next day I'm Scientologist. Well, I'm not Scientologist, I don't need the tax breaks. But I could be, Muslim. But the reality of it is, there are so many pieces to that. It's like the Woody Allen movie for white Catholics who bought a loaf of white bread and mayonnaise. It's not that simple. There are so many blocks. So as we are changing these systems, we don't do it nearly as often, but we can. We are free to change systems, and people do it all the time. Actually, I'm going to go backwards a step because there's a story that I want to tell you, and this is a pivotal moment in my life. When I graduated from college, one of the first jobs I had was for a database marketing firm, and it was the most horrendous company to work for ever. They believe that the way that you keep people productive is by keeping conflict in the workplace. You pit one group against each other, you make them fight, you make them argue, and that's how you have energy and success. And so I would go in these meetings as a recent college graduate. People would be yelling at each other, they'd be fighting, they'd be arguing, deadlines were missed, and it was horrible. But there was one person who never bought into all of the drama, who never raised her voice, who never yelled. She showed up, she gave her thoughts, her ideas. If it went her way, she did it. If it didn't, she was fine. Her name was Wendy. And after a few months, a group of us went out for drinks, and I asked Wendy, how is it possible that she was successful in this company, and she stayed in this company, but she didn't get involved with all of this fighting? And she explained to me that about 5 years earlier, she was in a plane crash. And there were 53 people aboard the plane, and 5 of them lived. All the 5 people were in one row. And anybody who was not in that row did not live. And after she recovered from the accident, when she went back to her life, she tried to go back to the same life that she had had before, but she could not see that life in the same way. Things which used to be important, things which used to be, she would yell about or argue about or care about, no longer seemed important. It was as if God or fate or chance or whatever you want to call it had gone into her head and ripped out all of the blocks except the most important ones. They left those in there. And I think Wendy's story is not that unique. There are plenty of people in the world who have gone through near-death experiences, the loss of a close loved one, the death of a child, for many the loss of a dog. And their entire reality is destroyed, it's torn to pieces. And when they rebuild it with a renewed focus on the things that are truly important to them. And it's different for every person. Some people become incredibly religious. Some people abandon God altogether. Some only focus on love and family and caring. Some focus on career. Some people think I didn't achieve everything that I needed to, and now I've got to focus and become president of the company or filthy rich or something. And I wondered at that time if there was some way that I could learn how to do that I could teach other people how to do that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not there yet. I'm not even remotely close, other than sharing the Wendy story with you. So up to this point, I have talked in general terms about reality and how people perceive reality. But I haven't really talked too personally about what I call my quantum reality. So the next 2 slides, and I'm running out of time.
Okay.
The next 2 slides are about, next several slides, are about what I call quantum reality and how I live quantum reality every day of my life. And the first point is that in a quantum reality, enlightenment is achieved by understanding all realities. It's kind of the opposite of Zen. In Zen, you try to free yourself. You try to free your mind of the encumbrances of the world so that you're not worried about paying electric bills or things like that. You can focus on becoming one with the universe. In my quantum reality, I try to incorporate as much as possible. I try to understand all realities. I would love to be able to understand every one of you and how you see the world and why you think the way you do. Right? Will I ever achieve that? No. I don't think I'll even remotely come close. But nonetheless, every time that I sit down with somebody and talk to them and get to know them and understand their thinking, I become a better person within this quantum reality. Another fundamental principle is all realities are real and all truths are true. This comes back, if I again give you the example of the 9/11, are they the magnificent 19? Are they terrorists? My answer is yes, they are both. I accept both as true. If you look at it from a quantum mechanics point, for those who are familiar with the concept of superposition of a quantum particle, when a quantum particle is in superposition, it means that it is everywhere. You can't say that it is here or there. In fact, we can prove that it is in all of these locations at the same time. And the best we can do is come up with a statistical probability that it will be here when we observe it, or it will be here when we observe it. So in my quantum reality, I attempt to exist in all realities until I have a personal interaction, in which case there is the observation, and I'm forced to collapse my reality state to a single reality. And nowhere is that more evident than a voting booth. Because when I walk into a voting booth, I only have an option of A or B, yes or no, Trump or kill myself. So at that point in time, I am forced to exist in a singular reality and actually place a vote. But nonetheless, until that point in time, my mind is free to try to understand everybody and everything. 3, you don't need a reason to change your reality. If you want, you can change the number 3 to a letter C. As in the case with the Wendy story, Wendy's reality was changed for her. She did not choose to go on a plane that she knew was going to crash and she was going to live. That happened. But you don't have to wait for something like that to happen. You can change any aspect of your reality at any time it occurs to you to do so. You are free. Right? Now, There are consequences that go with that. Because if your reality is integral to your society and the people believe you and love you, if you're a Catholic and you suddenly decide you're going to be Jewish, you need to understand that your Catholic friends probably aren't going to understand you as much and want to be around you as much, but you'll have new Jewish friends and a new society which you will integrate yourself in. Oh, let me go back. Speaking of reality, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but during this AG, I have been walking around with a small unicorn. His name is Squirrel. And as I walk around, the single greatest question I get is why? People want to understand the logic and the reason of why. Because they need to know if I'm crazy and they need to avoid me. Or if there's actually some amusing backstory. So the things that they have guessed that I lost a bet, and I was forced to drag it around with me. They guessed that it was performance art. They guessed that it was a social statement against dogs at the AG. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. And I'd be pretty sure that there are some of you who believe that the reason I did that was because it was incorporated in my presentation and it was kind of a precursor and a build-up. The fact is, they are all true and none of them are true. Okay? I simply chose to walk around with Squirrel because I chose to. And when we walk out of here, I may choose to not walk around with them, although I can tell you that the smiles on people's faces are wonderful. So it was, as an experiment, it was actually a very worthwhile experiment. Part of the quantum reality, number 4, is a great paradox. We talked about paradox. You know, your reality has paradox. One of the reasons people do not change their realities is because it immediately creates paradox. Your reality fits, all the pieces fit together. If you take one piece out, you've got, the other piece isn't going to fit in because it's going to be different. And you're going to have to change all sorts of things around to make these blocks fit together. And in a quantum reality, you don't worry about that. You accept paradox as a fact of life, as something that is normal. Okay? You learn to live with it. You learn to enjoy it. It becomes your friend. So that you are free to do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, and not worry about the fact that it doesn't fit with the things that you already know. Now, of course, if you are free to believe whatever you want, however you want, wherever you want, there's a great danger in it. That is like the idea, the perfect world for a narcissist or sociopath. That's the basic principle of the nature. I'm going to decide what makes me happy, and then that becomes reality, and boom, I'm going to do it. So it's a very dangerous thing, this quantum reality. One way to get beyond that is to have a purpose, to have a goal, so that as you adapt your reality, it is working toward this goal, which you believe to be a good or altruistic goal. Now, I use the words good or altruistic, but I don't really mean it. Because in my quantum reality, if your goal is to hate people, if your goal is to be the most evil person in the world, okay, that's your choice. Because there is no right and wrong. You can't prove it. Now, you're going to have a hard time in society, because it's going to be hard to find a society that thinks it's good that you are going around and being mean and being an idiot. But nonetheless, if that is your choice, that is your choice. So now, the final slide, is I'm going to share with you my personal experiences within quantum reality. How I live this on a day-to-day basis, how this manifests itself. Like you, my life has crap in it. Daily crap, right? I'm horribly broke, divorced, I work in a Spanish bank where half the people don't speak English. I drive a truck that's 15 years old, and things happen. But when they happen, I adapt my reality so that I can take away any negativity or pain. Let me give you an example. I have several different go-to realities. One of them is a mother in Africa who in the past 6 months has had 3 children die of dysentery. So when my car breaks down, when I get a flat tire, and I'm mad about that, I jump into that reality and I say, okay, what would my perspective be? Oh, by the way, I have a new one, which is a mother with a crying baby. So when that happens, I view this situation, this flat tire, this broken down car, as if I were that mother with dying children. How would she deal with this? And I'm pretty sure she wouldn't be too worried about the flat tire. She would look at all of the other aspects of life and say, wow, this is wonderful. I have another personality, which is a man from India, and who all he wants to do is get a job so he can feed his children. And there is no job to be had. There is no work. He lives in poverty, and so he has to steal or beg or borrow or do anything.
Work in a
so
call
again,
center.
when something bad happens to me, I think about that reality, and I put the current situation in the perspective of that reality, and it becomes a lot easier to say, you know what, whatever this problem is, I don't really need to worry about it.
Question?
Yes?
Why do you need the man in India if you already have the mother in Africa?
You know what? Sometimes it just fits. So thank you very much. I said it. So the question is, why do I need the father in India when I already have the mother in Africa? Okay? Great question. And those are just two examples. I actually have many more examples based upon the particular situation and whatever pops into my mind, whatever seems to work. Realistically, when I have problems in car, when somebody swerves in front of me and cuts me off, I go back to a time when my daughter was sick and I was driving her to the hospital and I drove like a maniac. And so anytime anybody drives like a maniac in front of me, I just assume, okay, that person probably has their daughter in the car, they're probably going to the hospital right now, and I really shouldn't be angry at them because I went through the exact same thing. So those are two examples. I actually have many more examples. Those are the two most common ones that just seem to work for me. And I hope, that everybody in here can come up with some sort of example so that next time shit happens in your life, you start to realize your lives are wonderful. If you look at the czars in Russia and the kings of England before 1800 and the pharaohs of Egypt who had everything in the world, their lives sucked compared to yours. They didn't have Doctor Who. Their medicine was leaching. If they even had that, their food, they had no refrigeration, no internet. If you had taken your life and gone back in history, and you don't have to go that far back, your lives would be unbelievable. People wouldn't, the Astors and the Vanderbilts would dream of having the things that you have today. So I'm going to talk about my divorce next. And so I said I was divorced, married 20 years, 15 happy, 5. Divorce sucks. Divorce is awful. Not only is it awful as you're getting to the end of the marriage and the divorce part, the actual process where you have to go through and you have to do counseling. Because when you're doing counseling, you sit there and you listen to somebody tell you all the bad things about yourself. And then you have to go and you have to say all the bad things you think about the other person. And then when you're done, you have to go home and you have to think about all the bad things that somebody said to you and the bad things you said to somebody else. It's horrible. It's a terrible process. I do not recommend it for anybody at all. But nonetheless, so I got divorced, and we went through this process. It was horribly painful. But on the day that my now ex-wife and I decided to get divorced, when we finally said, okay, this is it, no more counseling, we're going to stop that, and we're going to move forward with the divorce proceedings, I let go of all of the pain. I let go of all the bad parts. I had a 20-year marriage. There was wonderful things in the 20-year marriage, things that make me happy to this day. There were bad parts. Those bad parts served no purpose in my life. So I let them go. I gave them up. Because at that point in the process, the most important thing was the kids. What are we going to do as a now divorcing couple to make sure that we minimize the impact on the kids? And all of that negativity, there was nothing in it that would have helped the kids in any way. And I was really lucky because my wife, without even discussing with me, kind of did the same thing. I mean, after we got divorced, legally divorced, we still lived together as a happy family for 2 years because we were able to release all of that negativity, all of the pain, all of the bad part, and focus, carry the good part forward and focus on the future of what would be the best for everybody involved. Now, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's on Death and Dying. The 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So in my life, so that was specifically applied to people who are going, terminally ill, dying. But those same steps apply to many things. I mean, throughout our lives, bad things happen to us, and it's very natural for us to feel anger, to feel depression, to deny that it's happening, and then eventually accept that it's happening. One of the things that always confused me with these Italian women, the old women from the old days, who, after their husbands would die, they would wear black the rest of their lives. I always assume, well, they just haven't gotten to the acceptance part, and perhaps they never will. But I don't have that. I've never had that. I go right to acceptance for everything. One of my earliest memories as a child was in 6th grade, we read a book called Death Be Not Proud, about a teenager who had, I think it was brain cancer and was dying, so he documented, the whole process. He shared his fears, his anger, he shared the whole thing. And we were asked to write a paper on that. And the only thing that I could think to write was, why didn't God do that to me? I mean, I can handle it. I got no problem with dying. I'm a Catholic, I'm going to heaven, and if I have 6 months to prepare myself for a guarantee of eternal life, that's like a perfect thing. That's like way better than, dying coked up in a whorehouse in Nevada or something like that. It's, well, I didn't think that when I was in 6th grade. But I think that a lot now. Nonetheless, I was, even as a kid, the whole acceptance thing was natural for me. I didn't need all of those other things. So in my life, when I've gone through any sort of trauma like that, I get right to acceptance because the other things don't provide value. They don't help. They don't feel good. I understand they're a very natural process, and I'm not in any way trying to suggest that the rest of you should go through that. I'm simply trying to explain to you how I see it a little different from you. And this has always been a part of me, that I don't worry about things. If something happened 2 minutes ago, it's in the past. I can't change it, but I can change the future. And then the last thing, I mentioned earlier about having a purpose. I have a purpose. My purpose is love. I love you. I love every single one of you. And you don't have to do anything to deserve my love. And in fact, there is nothing that you can do to make me not love you. Okay? I wish I could say it's some sort of wonderful Catholic thing that I'm following Jesus. I just don't like hatred. When I feel hatred or anger and pain inside of me, it hurts. It feels like a cancer. It feels like it's eating away at me. And I just can't take that. So I take the easy route out. I love everybody. And I understand that it creates a natural paradox. If I love you, and I love you, and you do something bad to her, I should hate you. Because you did something bad to her. I can't. I love you. I still love you. I love every one of you. And the way that I'm able to achieve that love is through my quantum reality. When there is a paradox, when there's a reason for me not to love somebody, I simply figure out what reality is necessary for me to love that person. Do I pretend that they're my child? Do I pretend that they're my brother? Do I understand the pain in their lives that have made them do that bad thing? So I think it's not their fault. They are victims of their society. I don't care what it is. I'll come up with something. But in the end, as long as everything that I do is making up, this creative way of doing anything I want, as long as the end state is love, as long as the end state is moving toward love and making people feel that they are loved, I think I'm doing the right thing. So now, we get to the question and answer period. We have time. I have time. Okay. Oh, before I do, by the way, I will be doing a book signing later tonight. I haven't actually written a book. And I was going to bring some textbooks and some encyclopedias with me, but they were too heavy. So if you have a book and you want to come up to me, I'll be happy to sign it. Yes? So
he said you should be on this side or you should be on that side, and you're not on either side. It doesn't sound like a question.
So the question is, does my quantum reality put me into conflict with people who either believe one thing or the other thing, and I either don't believe either or I believe both? And the answer is absolutely. But here's the thing. Whatever your opinion, there are going to be you are going to have conflict with millions of people. There is no singular opinion in the entire world where everyone is going to agree with you. Okay? So,
Yeah, but I understand that.
Yep.
Okay, and I understand why they can't understand that you have a flexible mind and you can do it both.
because the way that I handle it, so the question, the second part of the question was, how do people understand or relate that I have a flexible mind and I don't agree or disagree with both? So the answer to that is I don't get involved in those discussions. You know, when I see those discussions and I talk to people, I tell people that I love them. You know, I tell people I agree with them, I tell people that I like them. I don't try to take the converse unless I'm going to move to be kind of playful and tease them a lot and, you know, post
So
that.
you just don't think you can learn anything from other people?
Oh, well, no. So the question was, do I think I can learn something? I can learn something from everybody in this room, and I want to learn something. I want to talk to everybody and get to know you. But nonetheless, whatever I learn from you is a part of a single reality that comes from you that is unique and personal. And I know for a fact there's somebody on the other side of the room that thinks the exact opposite of you, and I accept that as well. Yes?
But here you are in front of all these people trying to convince all of us that we should not claim to a single view of reality very highly.
No, I'm not trying to convince anybody that they shouldn't. What I'm simply trying to explain to you is I am different from you. I believe that almost everybody in this room has a singular perception of reality. And I'm just trying to explain to you why I'm an idiot walking around with a unicorn. I see the world differently than my peers. And I don't expect anybody to see the world the same way I do. Let me jump, yes?
So which reality do you use when you love Donald Trump?
So the question was, which reality do I use when I love Donald Trump? It usually involves lots of alcohol.
Alright, so there doesn't seem to be a lot of room in the way you see things for truth, for an absolute truth. Do you think there are any absolute
So
truth?
the question was, there doesn't seem to be a lot of room in what I'm saying in terms of absolute truth. And I have looked for absolute truth all of my life, and I haven't found. Every time I do this presentation, somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, I read an article that says absolute truth is what is it? I can't remember the last one that I had. But somebody comes up with an absolute truth, and I research it, and I cannot find anything. And like I said, these greatest philosophers have been studying this for eons, and they can't even agree if we're real or not. So, you know, is there an absolute truth? You know, I tried to come up with something so absurd, something like pedophilia, cannibalism, you know, something that everybody in the world, you know, throughout the history of the world would agree on. I haven't come up with it yet. Yes?
Would your absolute truth be love?
So the question was, isn't my absolute truth love? It is the absolute truth to me. But it is, but that is my, the word that I was using, you know, that is my purpose. You know, it isn't a truth, it's a purpose. And I need a purpose just because if I didn't, I would be a narcissistic prick. Well, if you ask anybody that knows me, they'll tell you I'm a narcissistic prick. But nonetheless, you know, that is the choice that I made. And I will tell you tomorrow that I may choose something else. That is, because in a quantum reality, I'm free to choose anything I want. Yes?
So, if I wanted to be your friend,
I hope you
I don't know which way you float.
Yes, absolutely. So the question is, the statement was, if you wanted to be my friend, you wouldn't know which way I flow. Absolutely, that is absolutely true. Because what I personally believe is that the people that you think you understand, you do not necessarily understand. You know, part of you know, being in these relationships, and I'll give the Bill Cosby example. There were millions of people who believed Bill Cosby was this wonderful person, and in fact he wasn't that. So it's very hard to truly know a person. I have another thing which I haven't even gotten into in this discussion. It's kind of a sub-thing. It's what I call the promise. Okay? The thing that is the thing that would make me a good friend and make you believe in me and want to be with me is understanding that to me the promise is everything. If I promise I am going to be at your room at 7 o'clock, that is as sacred as a promise if I promised I was going to spend the rest of my life. Every single promise is sacred, and I fight as hard as possible. I try to make as few promises as possible, because I only make promises I fulfill. But what happens is when you are my friend and you understand the value of that promise, then you begin to trust it. Then you say, if I say I'm not going to hurt you, you know, I'm always going to be there for you, and you witness that and you see it again and again, then you build that trust. But right off the bat, I wouldn't trust him. I'm crazy. I come up with all sorts of weird ideas. Yes?
Early in your presentation, you mentioned about a child being born and the blocks start building up. I perceive that you are going back to that condition.
So the statement was, early in my presentation, I talked about being born and building up those blocks. And isn't really what I'm saying goes back to that condition, because that was no fundamental truth, and we build up the truth. And you're absolutely right. The only difference is the perception of all the other shining things all around it. So when you were a child, you can't choose, between A and B. I now see A and B, and I'm simply choosing not to choose. I'm simply existing in this ether of all realities. And the point is, though, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm forced to come into a singularity. I'm forced to tell you that I am a Catholic. Tomorrow I may tell you I'm a Jew or a Muslim, or tomorrow I may love Donald Trump. No, not going to Donald Trump. But nonetheless, so that's the whole point that is the whole point of this quantum reality, is that every single day is a choice to choose who I am and what I believe and how I feel. And again, it all comes back to love for me. Yes?
How do you differentiate which type of alternative reality can you use? Let's say that somebody cuts you off. You have said that sometimes you use the reality, well, something happened to me and my mother, 5 kids died. What about also using a reality from your real past, such as any other experience you had, but you said sometimes you make it up. So what would be, how do you...
So the question is, when I'm in these situations where when I actively choose to exist in a different reality, why do I choose these rather extreme realities of the African woman or the man, from India, rather than personal experiences from my own life? And I'll be honest with you, both of those characters were a direct result of me reading the man in India. There was a book called City of Joy, I think it was, that touched me very deeply. It talked about this man and his daughter's wedding, and it created such a strong visual image in my mind that it pumped me. And the woman in Africa, I can't even remember whether it was National Geographic. There was a very strong story about the struggles of this one village and how these women, their children were dying and they didn't have clean water. And it just, that one image stuck so strongly in my mind that I go back to those. It's just natural for me. It could be, anything for anything. Any other questions? Yes?
So does that mean that when you make a decision, your primary or only mode of reasoning would be which decision is going to lead to more love in the world?
So the question is, when I make a decision, is the primary factor which of the alternatives will lead to the most love? No. Quite honestly, the decision is what's going to make me feel good. But within that, I need to say, does this match my ultimate goal? Of these choices, this one's going to make me feel the most good, but it's going to hurt that person. And it's going to hurt them a little, but it'll make me feel good. And this one over here will make that person feel wonderful, but it won't be good. Well, I'm going to choose that one. It generates the most love. So it's a driving factor, but it's not everything. Yes?
But do you even need to decide what to believe when you actually have to make a decision?
So the question, do I need to decide what to believe?
Yes, aren't beliefs kind of superfluous until it comes down, I have to make a decision right now?
Yes. So
you keep your mind open for years and years and years, but then when it comes down to it, that's when you make a decision.
yeah, so the questions aren't beliefs superfluous until the point of the decision. And that's why I use the word quantum in this, because that is an exact description of a quantum particle. It exists in all possible states until you observe it, and at that point it collapses to a singularity when you have to make a decision. So my natural state, let's be honest, I'm a human, my brain works the same as yours mostly, and so, I'm not floating around with every possible thought in my head. I mostly try to come up with these alternative realities when I'm faced with a decision that I may be hurting somebody or arguing with somebody, or I'm feeling bad, or it's something negative, something that doesn't contribute to love, and then I put myself in one of those alternate states. Yes?
So if you're trying to provide information to other people, teach them, and you have maybe 3 explanations of how something could work, you still must have some priority of which to describe first.
So the statement was that if I'm trying to convince or teach somebody how to do it, and I have these multiple states. How do I put them? How do I teach them in a priority of which one is first? And so I will first state, absolutely, I'm not trying to convince or teach anybody because I can't. I'm only understanding how I think myself. Now, yes, I'm writing a book because everybody in Mensa writes a book, and I'm trying to put that thought and that logic into that. And if I ever do, I think it'll be a good book. But until such a time, it's just a bunch of random thoughts down on paper.
Yeah, I'm really aware of how reframing can totally change your reality, and I have actually used that very same thing about somebody when somebody cuts me off to tell a story to calm myself down so I don't get all freaked out about it. But I'm wondering, for me, I make a distinction between understanding another person's reality and accepting another person's reality. For me, it's more important that I accept them because I can accept without understanding, just like I can understand without accepting.
Right. So the statement was, when you are dealing with another person's reality, there's a difference between understanding their reality and accepting that reality. And the accepting of the reality is the more valuable in the situation because you may never understand. And the truth is, I'm never going to understand all realities. So I try to understand the reality, but you're right, the acceptance of the reality is what drives the direct behavior. And so yes, I agree with you that that is the more critical of the two. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much.